On the surface, Naomi Judd seemed the picture of perfection, but on the inside, there was pain and the persistent haunting of a difficult past.
Wynonna Judd has always been a powerhouse in country music, but recently she revealed something so raw and emotional that it left fans reeling. For years, we've seen her and her mother, Naomi, dominate the charts as the Judds. But behind the music, there's a deeper story that's only now coming to light. What did Wynonna confess about her time in the duo that took everyone by surprise? Stick around, because what she shared is something you won't want to miss. Wynonna Judd gets real about sisterhood. When Wynonna Judd speaks about her life after her mother's death, it doesn't feel like a celebrity trying to push a memoir or spin a tragedy. It feels like someone trying to make sense of the silence that follows a storm. And that silence, unlike the noise of grief people expect, is confusing, uncomfortable, and deeply personal. She's not trying to be profound. She's just telling the truth, one sentence at a time. This isn't just about losing her mother, Naomi Judd. It's about losing a version of her life she never thought would end. And somewhere in the middle of all that, she's still trying to figure out where her sister Ashley fits in the picture and where she fits too. For Wynonna, Naomi's death wasn't simply a moment. It was a kind of ending that bled into everything, into her career, her family, and even the way she speaks about the past. She describes it as not exactly a physical death, more like the lights going out on something spiritual, something invisible, something shared. She says they don't talk much now, her and Ashley, and not in that passive-aggressive, we don't talk kind of way. It's more honest than that. It's the distance that just showed up and stayed. And when she realizes she's crying during the interview, she doesn't apologize. She explains it away the way only a mother would. She's dealing with teenagers, and life has a funny way of giving you emotional payback. It's clear that the grief isn't tidy. There are no step-by-step instructions. It's just a mess. A beautiful, infuriating, confusing mess. Wynonna doesn't paint her relationship with Ashley as a feud. There's no dramatic story, no screaming match to flash back to. Instead, she quietly admits that they're not close right now. She doesn't reach out, and neither does Ashley. Sometimes, she says, Ashley is probably just sitting at home wondering where Wynonna is, what she's doing. And Wynonna imagines she misses the road, the long nights, the tour buses, the chaos that used to be their normal. But now, there's none of that. There's just space, lots of it. She suspects her sister is struggling, not just with grief, but with the adjustment to this new reality. One where the music has stopped, and the spotlight has moved on. Because for decades, they were together more than they were apart. And now, they've slipped into separate routines, with no script to follow and no encore to bring them back together. The Judds may all live on the same piece of property, a beautiful farm in Tennessee, but it's not the pastoral dream people might imagine. They're not sharing casseroles on the porch or checking in every day. They each have their own home, their own space, their own silence. When asked about it, Wynonna doesn't hesitate. She calls it what it is, weird, but also totally normal for a family like theirs. All families are weird, she says, as if it's just a fact of life. And honestly, who can argue with that? Their closeness in geography doesn't guarantee emotional closeness. Sometimes it even makes the distance feel sharper, like being in separate rooms of the same house and still feeling miles apart. One of the hardest transitions, Wynonna admits, is watching the whirlwind slow down. Her mother lived for the spotlight. She adored the production, the glamour, the sheer energy of it all. Wynonna remembers it vividly, costume changes, massive meet and greets, the roar of 1,000 voices echoing back at them every night. And now, there's just silence. She doesn't mean silence like peace. She means the uncomfortable kind. The kind that creeps in when everything you used to live for is suddenly over. For Naomi, who thrived in front of crowds and cameras, that transition had to be brutal. Wynonna imagines her mom still wanting that energy, still aching for the rush of the crowd. She says they used to talk about it all the time, how Naomi loved the show more than she did. Wynonna always felt more connected to the music and the people, while Naomi was the firework display that couldn't be dimmed. Wynonna doesn't hide from the fact that she's still grieving. She's just doing it differently now. She talks about survivor's guilt in a way that doesn't sound cliché. It sounds raw, like she's still figuring it out. Performing without Naomi feels strange. Continuing the legacy without her feels both honorable and haunting. She wonders aloud if answering all these questions in the interview might actually teach her something about herself. Maybe even something she didn't know she was holding on to. Because talking about Naomi, her absence, her love for the crowd, her larger-than-life presence, is a way of keeping her alive, not just in memory, but in spirit. There's no bow at the end of Wynonna's story, no final statement or lesson she's trying to deliver. She's just living it, day by day, trying to be a mother, a performer, a sister, a woman who is still trying to understand how to be all those things without her mother standing beside her. And that's what makes it powerful. She's not performing grief. She's surviving it, quietly, honestly, one messy step at a time. What do they have in common? Wynonna's relationship with her younger sister, Ashley, isn't simple. She says the only thing they really share right now is grief, a missing father, and a mother they both loved and lost. She admits, without bitterness, that they're just very different people. They don't talk often. They don't spend time together. And that distance? It's not new. Wynonna left home at 18, just as Ashley was turning 14. Back then, it felt like survival. At 14, Ashley had to grow up fast. Wynonna had already been forced into adulthood by fame, responsibility, and everything that comes with being the one who made it. She reflects on it now and sees how that separation became permanent. Somewhere along the line, their roles got blurred. Wynonna didn't just become a big sister. She became a second mother. Ashley even called her Sister Mommy. Wynonna hated that. Not because she didn't love Ashley, but because she wasn't ready to be anyone's mother. She wanted to be a sister, but life didn't allow that. By the time most people are learning how to navigate adulthood, Wynonna was performing in arenas. She had songs to record, stages to command, interviews to survive. She missed Ashley's prom, she missed birthdays, she missed the normal, boring stuff that makes siblings feel close. Now she sees that clearly. She compares their relationship to a long marriage, where both people ended up living separate lives. They didn't fall apart in some explosive way. They just kept moving in different directions, and by the time they looked up, they were strangers with matching last names. For over 30 years, Wynonna toured with Naomi. The stage wasn't just a career, it was a full-time job that demanded all of her energy. Looking back, she confesses something that's hard to admit. Sometimes it felt like she had to choose between her mother and her sister. And at the time, her mother always needed her more. The dynamic was complicated, it was demanding, and in trying to be everything to one person, Wynonna had little left to give anyone else. She didn't have the luxury of slowing down. She was constantly reacting, fixing, performing, working. There was never time to pause and ask what she really needed or what her sister might have needed from her. But now, As she watches time slipping through the cracks, she's starting to realize how much they've both missed. Wynonna is a mother. Her life revolves around her kids, her home, and the quiet responsibilities that come with staying put. Ashley, on the other hand, is single, independent, and constantly traveling. She sends text messages from Scotland. She lives out of suitcases. It's not that they don't care about each other. It's that their lives no longer intersect. One is grounded. The other is always in motion. Wynonna says people might assume they don't get along, that they disagree on everything. But she asks, can anyone point to a sisterhood that's never had cracks? They don't pretend to be perfect. In fact, Wynonna is the first to admit they're dysfunctional. And maybe that's the most honest thing about them. Wynonna didn't grow up knowing her biological father. She was 30 when she learned the man she thought was her dad actually wasn't. That discovery left scars, the kind that shapes who you become and how you love. She and Ashley have never hidden the messiness of their story. They've been honest about the pain, the distance, and the identity questions that never quite go away. She calls it being broken and blessed at the same time. That paradox runs through everything, especially in how she remembers Naomi. A marriage built in reverse. While the family dynamics are complicated, Wynonna's relationship with her husband is a rare bright spot. She talks about it like a teenager in love. Her voice softens when she remembers the early days, how she had her outfits laid out for their honeymoon, size 8, working out 5 times a week, feeling on top of the world. They're in a band together. They're on stage, locking eyes mid-song. It's playful. It's romantic. It's everything people imagine when they think of a storybook love story. She's known him since she was 20. She trusts him completely. He's calm in her storm. And maybe that's what gives her the strength to keep showing up, to keep trying to heal a lifetime of emotional wounds while still performing for the world. In a flash, she went from 5-time Grammy-winning country legend to the woman holding her husband up in the shower, begging God to just let them get through one more day. She didn't get the newlywed experience. There were no slow Sunday mornings or spontaneous road trips. What she got instead was a medical crisis, a house built for physical rehab, and a new kind of love story. One that started with chaos and demanded every last drop of her strength. This wasn't the dream, but that's what happened. And somehow, Wynonna is still standing in the middle of it, finding grace where most people would have just crumbled. Right after they got married, life flipped. One moment, she was being introduced on stage with the glitz and glow of country royalty. The next, she was sitting beside a hospital bed, watching doctors scramble and praying for a miracle. They went from the award shows to emergency rooms, from rehearsals to long nights in sterile hallways. Their new home wasn't a honeymoon suite. It was redesigned from top to bottom to support her husband's physical limitations. Ramps replaced rugs. Medical gear sat where flowers should have been. It wasn't just a detour from the life they planned. It was a whole new map, one she hadn't asked for. This was supposed to be their beginning. Wynonna imagined they'd have a decade or two of laughter and easy living before life got hard. Instead, she found herself holding her husband upright in the shower because one side of his body no longer worked. He had no use of his left hand, his leg didn't move, and Wynonna, barely out of the honeymoon phase, stood there trying not to fall apart while bracing his weight with both arms. It felt surreal. She remembers thinking this was something they were supposed to face at 80 or 90, not in their first year of marriage, not while the band was still on tour, not when life was finally going well, but there they were. Wynonna didn't have the luxury of complaining. Survival doesn't wait for you to be emotionally ready. Her mother had taught her and Ashley early on, when life falls apart, you keep moving. There's no pause to ask why. You get up, you show up, you do the work, or you don't eat. That was the rule growing up. So Wynonna followed it. Because what else was there to do? She didn't feel strong. She didn't have a powerful mantra or a brave social media post. What she had was necessity. If she broke, they'd both fall. So she stayed standing. People like to label moments like these as inspirational. But Wynonna doesn't frame it that way. It wasn't some motivational anthem. It was messy and desperate and deeply personal. She wasn't singing songs of strength. She was just begging God to meet her somewhere in the mess. Anywhere, really. The goal wasn't to feel better. The goal was just to survive. Her husband had been told he'd never play music again. Wynonna wasn't ready to accept that. She says she was mad enough to fight back. Mad enough to stare down the impossible and say, "Not today. Not me. Not us. Not like this." And somehow, that fire lit the way forward. Her husband, she says, is built differently. Where most people would have folded, he got up. It takes him longer to do things, but he never says can't. He just finds another way. 4 days skiing in Telluride, no left leg, no workin' left hand. But he still hit the slopes. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for pity. He just moved. Wynonna still can't explain how he does it, but she's in awe of it. What moves her most isn't just his ability to function, it's his joy. He's not just alive, he's alive and laughing, bringing warmth into spaces that could have gone cold. Wynonna's not always able to match that joy. She's intense, spiritual, always in her head. There are moments when he tells her to just breathe, and she wants to scream. Breathing doesn't fix everything, and in those moments, his calm feels like a trigger, not a comfort. She once joked that asking her to relax was like trying to baptize a cactus. Wrong moment, wrong mood, wrong girl. But even in those clashes, those emotionally charged, imperfect human moments, there's love. Real, raw love. Not the romantic kind that gets posted on Instagram, but the kind that shows up in hospitals and rehab centers and bathrooms with no privacy. The kind of love you never plan for, but can't imagine living without. How Naomi Judd's life unraveled off stage. Before country music was dominated by rhinestone cowboys and viral TikTok remixes, there were the Judds, a mother-daughter duo that not only made waves, they practically owned the charts throughout the 80s. Naomi Judd wasn't just the voice behind the hits. She was the soul, the drive, the woman who took her daughters and turned heartbreak into harmony. She raised a future Oscar nominee, Ashley Judd. She launched Wynonna Judd, her partner on stage and in fame. Together, they lit up the Grammys, topped Billboard charts, and turned family history into country music gold. But on the eve of one of her biggest honors, her induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame, everything shattered. Naomi Judd's life ended the way so many people's do, quietly and painfully, behind closed doors. And what came next was a heartbreak no spotlight could soften. To understand how it all unraveled, we have to go back, not to the fame, but to the foundation. Long before the red carpets and recording contracts, Naomi Judd was someone else entirely. Long before she was Naomi, she was Diana Ellen Judd. Born January 11, 1946, in Ashland, Kentucky, her world was far from glamorous. Her mother worked as a cook on riverboats. Her father ran a modest gas station. It was small-town life in every sense until tragedy struck. In 1965, her younger brother Brian died of leukemia at just 17 years old. That loss stayed with Diana for the rest of her life. It was her first taste of grief, and it left a scar that never really healed. That kind of pain doesn't just pass, it follows. Soon after, she became a young mother. Her daughter, Christina Clare, whom the world would later know as Wynonna, was born. But her father, Charles Jordan, disappeared before ever holding her. Diana didn't wait around for apologies. She picked up the pieces and moved forward, finding a new partner, Michael Ciminella, who married her and gave his name to her daughter. In 1968, she gave birth again, this time to Ashley Judd. But while the family was growing, the marriage was falling apart. When her marriage to Michael Ciminella fell apart, Diana found herself at a familiar crossroads. Left alone again, this time with 2 young daughters and 0 safety net. Ashley was just a baby. Wynonna, still going by her birth name, was tugging at her heels. With nothing left to lose, Diana packed up their lives and moved to California, hoping for a fresh start. She enrolled in nursing school at the College of Marin, determined to build something stable for her children. But something unexpected happened while she was focused on saving others. She started saving herself through music. That's where everything shifted. By the time Naomi was in her 20s, she was on her own. Single mother, 2 kids, no fame, no money. She studied nursing and hustled for every paycheck while raising 2 daughters in a world that wasn't built to make space for single mothers. But something in her refused to stay quiet. Somewhere between night shifts and scraped-together meals, music crept in. At some point in that chaos, Diana became Naomi. She borrowed the name from the Bible, a woman left to fend for herself after being widowed in a foreign land. It felt right. It felt like her. Naomi meant pleasant and lovely. But beneath the softness was a story of survival. Her daughter, Christina Clare, adopted the name Wynonna and soon joined her mother in performing small gigs around town. They weren't trying to become stars. They were trying to get by. But the music had something magnetic in it. Pain turned into harmony. Grief turned into melodies. And just like that, the Judds were born. The rise of the Judds. It didn't take long before mother and daughter turned heads. The Judds exploded into the country music scene like they'd been there all along. From small-town shows to sold-out stadiums, their harmonies became a voice for women, families, and the kind of hard-won love country music was made for. Between 1984 and 1991, the Judds landed 20 top 10 hits. 14 of those reached number 1. That wasn't just success. That was domination. For 8 consecutive years, they reigned on the country charts with no sign of slowing down. At the Grammys, they were unstoppable. 5 wins, multiple nominations, and a fan base that stretched from Kentucky porches to Hollywood studios. But Naomi wasn't just singing. She was writing too. In the early 90s, she co-wrote Love Can Build a Bridge with John Barlow Jarvis and Paul Overstreet. It wasn't just a hit, it was an anthem. The song won Country Song of the Year at the 1991 Grammy Awards and was later covered by global icons like Cher, Eric Clapton, Nena Cherry, and Chrissie Hynde. Their version soared on the UK singles chart in 1995, proving that the Judds had gone far beyond the American South. They were international now. But just as their sound was crossing oceans, Naomi's body was betraying her. In 1991, right at the height of her fame, Naomi was rushed to the hospital. She had been feeling sick for a while, but the symptoms were strange. Fatigue, pain, and a yellow tint to her skin that wouldn't go away. Doctors delivered a diagnosis that would shake her world: Hepatitis C. The virus, which attacks the liver, had likely entered her system years earlier, possibly through a contaminated needle during her time as a nurse, long before her musical career ever began. Back then, safety standards were different, and one moment of exposure had left a time bomb ticking inside her. Hepatitis C isn't just a liver disease. It can evolve into cirrhosis or liver cancer if untreated. For Naomi, the illness wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, and professional. Touring was now a health risk. Exhaustion became chronic. And just like that, the music had to stop. The Judds announced their farewell tour. The world assumed it was just time for a break. But behind the scenes, the decision was filled with fear and grief. Naomi's body couldn't keep up with the career she had worked so hard to build. Ironically, their farewell concert became one of the most successful pay-per-view events in country music history. Most people would have disappeared from the spotlight after that. Not Naomi. She took her illness and turned it into a mission. She became one of the most prominent voices for hepatitis C awareness in the country. She founded the Naomi Judd Education and Research Fund and partnered with the American Liver Foundation to speak about her condition at major health events. Naomi not only advocated for herself, she spoke for the voiceless, those without health care, women struggling with access, communities affected by HIV and AIDS, victims of domestic violence. Even natural disaster survivors found a helping hand through her philanthropic work. She used her voice, off stage this time, for people who never made the front page. But even with all that generosity and compassion, something was quietly slipping away. Behind the public appearances and charity work, Naomi Judd was still fighting an invisible battle. One that music couldn't heal. One that fame couldn't distract from. And one that would eventually take her life. What fans didn't see was Naomi's decades-long battle with depression. The kind that isn't solved by success or dulled by applause. She spoke about it in bits and pieces over the years, how the darkness would creep in without warning. How, even when things were good, she didn't always feel it. In private, there were hospital stays, therapy sessions, and long periods of isolation. Fame didn't cure the hurt. If anything, it magnified it. By 1998, Naomi Judd had spent years battling a brutal illness. Hepatitis C had once brought her to her knees, forcing her to say goodbye to the stage and fans who adored her. But after years of treatment and medical care, she did something that surprised everyone. She got back up. With her health finally back on track, Naomi didn't just return to her old life. She rewrote it. Acting became her new outlet. In 1999, she appeared in A Holiday Romance, and it sparked a series of on-screen roles that kept coming in. At a time when many in her shoes would have retired quietly, Naomi turned the page and started again. And it wasn't just acting that called her back. The music was still there, waiting. She reunited with her daughters, Wynonna, the powerhouse vocalist, and Ashley, the rising star of Hollywood. The three of them took the stage again, performing in front of over 30,000 fans. The comeback was real. For over a month, the Judds were back in their element, thrilling audiences across the country. Their performances even earned them a nomination for Top Vocal Duo at the Academy of Country Music Awards. In 2005, Naomi stepped into yet another new role. Talk show host. Naomi's New Morning aired on the Hallmark Channel, giving her a space to speak openly about life, healing, and hope. And she didn't stop there. She began publishing self-help books, sharing the wisdom she'd earned the hard way. Reality TV followed. She showed up on Can You Duet and even My Kitchen Rules. It was clear, Naomi Judd was determined to stay present, no matter how many lives she'd already lived. the day the music stopped. To the world, the Judds looked like a fairy tale. Wynonna became a solo music icon in her own right, and Ashley transformed into a critically acclaimed actress with a string of Hollywood hits under her belt. But inside this family of stars, there was something quietly breaking. On April 30th, 2022, that silence shattered completely. Just one day before Naomi Judd was scheduled to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, she took her own life. It stunned the music world, her fans, and most of all, her family. The honor she had waited decades to receive would arrive without her. Her daughters accepted it for her, through tears and heartbreak, unsure how to process a loss so sudden and so heavy. Behind closed doors, Naomi had been struggling more than anyone knew. And that day, the pain became too much. It wasn't about weakness. It wasn't about giving up. It was about the kind of suffering that doesn't always look dramatic until it's irreversible. Naomi Judd was a survivor of many things: poverty, single motherhood, illness, rejection, and public scrutiny. But depression, as so many families have come to learn, doesn't care about strength. It doesn't care how many awards you've won or how many people adore you. It just hurts. Her husband, Larry Strickland, and daughters, Wynonna and Ashley, made a desperate request to the courts. They wanted police records and audio from the scene sealed, not out of secrecy, but grief. The trauma was too heavy, too raw. But the truth couldn't be hidden for long. Naomi Judd was found at her home in Leiper's Fork, Tennessee. She was 76. Her death was ruled a self-harm, caused by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It was a moment that left fans stunned, her family devastated, and a nation heartbroken. Ashley Judd appeared on Good Morning America shortly after to set the record straight. The family had made the difficult decision to share the truth, not just to honor Naomi, but to help others who were silently suffering. Ashley explained that her mother had long battled mental illness, diagnosed with severe depression, bipolar disorder, and post-traumatic stress. She had been prescribed medications that triggered intense side effects: tremors, hair loss, swelling. It wasn't just the illness that wore her down. It was everything that came with trying to treat it. In the wake of her passing, the tributes poured in. Carrie Underwood, among many others, honored Naomi's legacy, remembering her not just as an icon, but as a deeply human woman who had endured more than most could imagine. She was tough, kind, generous, and resilient, but not invincible. Naomi Judd gave the world music, honesty, laughter, and activism. She opened her heart to millions, even when it hurt. And while her final moment came with heartbreak, the story she left behind was one of remarkable courage. Every time a Judds song plays on the radio, that story plays too. Naomi Judd's legacy goes far beyond her music. She was a fighter, a mother, and a voice for the unheard. Her strength and passion continue to inspire us all. So, next time you hear a Judds song, remember the woman who turned every battle into a victory. What's your favorite memory of Naomi? Share it with us in the comments.